All right, just give it a few more seconds and we're here. All right, what's up, everybody? How you guys doing? I haven't done one of these in a minute, but seeing that it is Super Bowl weekend, we have a special 30 for 30 tomorrow on Al Davis versus the NFL. So I figured, hey, why not get back on it, talk about this because I can. So, as always, my name is Junior Juan. If you guys don't know by now, you guys follow all the pages, all the annoying text messages, and all the posts I put. I want to thank everybody that does follow, that does watch, and everything. You guys are the best. So, let's just get right into it. We're going to have a lot of fun today, and it's going to be a fun one. As I mentioned, we are going to talk about the 30 for 30 that's going to be released tomorrow about Al Davis versus the NFL. So, for the people that do not know what it is, really, it's going to be pretty much a show, pretty much a documentary on the battles between Pete Rozelle and Al Davis. Now, there's a lot of fans that are, following the page, that are, following me, that are a little too young, that some might not even know who Pete Rozelle is or who Al Davis is. So, Pete Rozelle was the first commissioner of the National Football League. Al Davis is used to be the owner of the Oakland Raiders, now Las Vegas Raiders. So that's just a little tidbit of what you're going to see tonight. So, as always, thank you for tuning in, and let's just get right into it. So, I'm pretty sure tomorrow they're already doing the commercials. If you haven't seen the commercials on ESPN, on your phone, wherever it is, I'm sure all you're hearing is the battle between Al Davis and Pete Rozelle. And the battle was Al Davis wanted to move his franchise to Los Angeles, and Pete Rozelle was not having it. The owners were not having it, so he was really going to try to take it to the NFL. And this became a big debacle at the time for good reasons on both sides. So, but before we even get into that, I'm sure what they're not telling you is that this fight has been brewing way before it hit the courtroom, way before it hit any type of legal document. This was a battle brewing in the 60s when a startup league rose up, new startup league, it looked like fun, was going to take on the strong-headed NFL. And I know what you guys are thinking. Well, there's only one NFL. Well, at the time, the NFL in the 60s was not the NFL that you see today. Back then, they had some competition, and it was called the American Football League. And the American Football League was this new league that was brought up by a man named Lamar Hunt. Lamar Hunt is, if you watch football and if you watch, the conference championships on Sundays for football, you will notice that the winner of each conference gets a trophy. And the NFC side, you get the Pete Rozelle Award, which is the representative for the NFC. Well, if you win the AFC, you get what's called the Lamar Hunt Trophy. There's a reason for it. Without the AFL, there is no AFC. And to kind of put it into fruition, this was a startup league, consisted of 8 teams, West and East. That was it. There was no North, there was no South, there was no Central, there was none of that. It was just East and West. Representing the East, all these teams that are in the AFL are still playing today. You just know them as a different team. So let's start with the East. You have the New York Titans. I know what you guys are thinking. Are those the Titans of Tennessee today? No. Those are actually the New York Jets. They're back then when this franchise first started, they were known as the New York Titans. Then you had the Buffalo Bills, who are still the Bills. Then you had the Houston Oilers. Now, obviously today we have the Houston Texans, but back then they had the Houston Oilers. Well, the franchise is still alive today. You just know them as the Tennessee Titans. For some of you fans that weren't around in the mid 90s, that maybe a little too young, or you just started getting into football and you didn't know who is what teams left, but the Houston Oilers are now the Tennessee Titans. But in the 60s, the Titans were the Oilers. And then lastly, to round off the East, you had the Boston Patriots. You guys just know them now today as the New England Patriots. So that's your four. That's your first four. Your next four, considering out of the West, you had the Dallas Texans. Now I know what you're thinking, but Dallas is the Cowboys. Well, before all this started, there was two franchises in Dallas in the 60s: the upstart Dallas Cowboys and the AFL upstart Dallas Texans. They were only there for a year because they knew they were not going to compete with the NFL right away. And Lamar Hunt had to make a decision. This team still exists today. You just know them as the Kansas City Chiefs. So there you go. There's your little history lesson about the Chiefs for a little bit. You had the Los Angeles Chargers. Yes, this is not the first time the Chargers moved to Los Angeles. Their first year of existence, they only played 1 year in Los Angeles before they made the move to San Diego. And then, down the road, they got the approval to come and move to Los Angeles. The Denver Broncos, that's your third AFL West team. And then you had the Oakland Raiders, who, a little fun fact, were almost the Minnesota Raiders. Had the NFL not put a last minute bid to create the upstart Minnesota Vikings. That's how you got the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders, the city of Oakland, put in a bid to get a professional football team for the city. First, they were going to be called the Seniors, but due to kind of, I guess, back in the day, that was kind of a little bit of a gangster term. You really couldn't use that around that city, so they just switched them to the Raiders, and there you go. That was your 8 AFL teams. And then obviously you had the NFL, which is today, the Cleveland Browns, the Baltimore Colts. Yes, that's right, the Baltimore Colts. We're going to get more into that later. So this battle between the AFL, NFL, the NFL wasn't too happy. The NFL kind of told its players, look, don't worry about the AFL. They're a bunch of nobodies. This league's not going to last for 5 years. Going behold now, that's called the AFC. So in the 60s, it was sort of like well, who are you going for? Because back then you only had one football league. You only had one. It was just the NFL. Well, now you got the AFL, who was trying to compete with the NFL, and for good reasons. Lamar Hunt wanted to purchase a team for the NFL. They didn't approve, so he just decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to start my own league, and this is how you got the AFL. It wasn't until 1967 where the first Super Bowl was played, and how it started was both sides just kind of wanted to see, and the people of America kind of wanted to see how the competition stacked up against each other. Well, it wasn't until 7 years later how it would go. The winner of the AFL would take on the winner of the NFL, put them in a match, Super Bowl. Sounds familiar? Well, that's what we're going to get this Sunday. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to be representing the AFC. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be representing the NFC. That's how it became. So, first 2 years, the first two Super Bowls, the Packers were just led by Vince Lombardi, which is now known as the Vince Lombardi Trophy. When you win, you get the little Super Bowl trophy, Vince Lombardi on the side. That's how he got the name, because he was the first coach to win it. It went until Super Bowl III, where the Jets beat the Baltimore Colts in that matchup for the AFL to finally get its recognition. And the Super Bowl IV was the last year of the AFL. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Minnesota Vikings, and then they merged together. So this is where I'm coming to. Al Davis and Pete Rozelle have been fighting each other. We're fighting each other from 1960 all the way up until the 80s to have this going. So, lo and behold, here we are. About some odd years later, ESPN's finally going to do a video on the battle between each two. So, the deal was Al Davis wanted to move his franchise from Oakland to Los Angeles. In that time frame, Pete Rozelle, the rest of the owners in the NFL, did not like the idea that you could just move because back then, like today, in order to relocate, you had to get the approval to relocate as a franchise. You had to get the approval of every owner. Well, not every owner, about three-quarters of the owner to relocate a franchise. The problem was in Al Davis's case, it was a little different. Tell me if this sounds familiar. The city of Oakland did not want to give Al Davis and his family a new stadium, new updates to the Oakland Alameda Coliseum. Sound familiar? Well, if you're thinking I'm talking about 2020, I'm not. I'm talking about 1981. Oakland decided to tell Al Davis to stick it to himself, go screw himself, and if you don't want to play here, good luck. Well, he took it to the courts because he believed he had every right to leave because he had no stadium at that time. He had no contract with the stadium committee of the city of Oakland to stay. So he wanted to relocate to Los Angeles for marketing reasons, whatever the reason was. NFL did not find that. The NFL forced Al to try to figure it out. Al said he was going to sue. They went to court. The Los Angeles Court of Appeals gave Al Davis all the power for him and the okay to move. That the NFL cannot deny Al Davis because he had no contract applied to him from the NFL to where he can play. The city of Oakland and the stadium committee screwed him, saying go find somewhere else to play. So the Court of Appeals approved Al Davis to relocate to Los Angeles. Now, this was back in 1982. They moved, and the NFL, the fear of the NFL was, well, if he can move this way, this is going to start a chain of events. Al didn't want to see it like that, but unfortunately it did. And the chain of events just started to unravel little by little, franchises moving. So the New York Jets moved to New Jersey. So that was kind of the first one. Then we all know about bringing us some bad wounds. We know about the Mayflower, where the Baltimore Colts moved to Indianapolis. That's right. The Colts started in Baltimore. Now they just moved to Indianapolis in the middle of the night. They put the trailer up, they packed everything, and they on the Mayflower compact truck, and they said, "Let's get the hell out of here," and move to Indianapolis. And there was nothing the NFL can do about it, because back then, it's not like today, where if a team is going to play in a city, the city and the team actually have obliged contracts of how long they have to stay here. Back then, there was none of that. It was all free monopoly at this point. So then the Cleveland Browns down the road went from Cleveland to Baltimore, which you now know them as the Ravens. So this is why I always bring up when I started watching football, there was no Cleveland Browns. There was no Cleveland. I just knew them as the Baltimore Ravens until I got older and I realized, holy crap, those are the new Browns. The Cleveland Browns you see today, that is actually a new franchise. The old Browns, they're the Ravens. So that's kind of where everybody gets mixed up. And then you had the St. Louis Cardinals moving to Arizona. And then you had the Rams going from being born in LA, moving to St. Louis, coming back to Los Angeles. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Houston Oilers moving to Tennessee. You just now know them as the Tennessee Titans. So, lo and behold, this is the whole thing the NFL feared was if he moves, other franchises can do the same because they don't have the contracts and the obligation to stay at a city. In today's world, it's all about the contracts, it's all about paperwork. So now whenever teams want to relocate, whenever teams want to move, there's a three-part system that a lot of people don't understand. Number one, you got to pay the fee. The owners have to pay the relocation fee to wanting to move. Number two, you got to get the approval of the owners that you want to move. You got to get the three-quarter majority that you want to move. And then number three, you got to go to the city. Even if you already paid the fee, if you already paid, or if you already got the votes, you still had to go to the city that you wanted to move to. Talk to city officials, talk to the committees, and pretty much tell them that we want to play here. We want to get something done as far as new stadium, funding for the stadiums, the whole shebang. So that's what Al Davis did. Al Davis moved to Los Angeles. He talked to the committee. The committee said, look, you can play here in the Coliseum for now. We'll build you a stadium down the line. Now, back then, down the line could have meant 2 years. It could have meant 20 years. Nobody knew how long Al Davis was going to stay there. So in 1982, the courts approved that the Raiders can move from Oakland to Los Angeles. So the Oakland Raiders moved to LA, and everything just started there. And the Raiders moved at the time when, at that time in the 80s, in Los Angeles, apparently, especially in Los Angeles, they had this huge boom of this minority boom of people living in Los Angeles. And this is why the city of LA, some fans of LA love the Raiders, because at that time it was a party. At that time, you had Latinos, you had African Americans, Asian Americans, all over. And what had happened was in LA at that time, with the minority boom, everybody can go to the stadium, everybody can go to a Raider game, and they felt like they were part of a team because the Rams just left to LA to Anaheim. So their feelings were kind of hurt. But when they got the Raiders, that was kind of like their team. That was their motto, that was going to be their team for life. And that was just the be all beginning and end of it. They moved to Los Angeles from 1982 all the way up until 1994. What happened is, down the road, Al started. In the beginning, it was all good. They were winning, and they were going to conference championships, Super Bowls, winning one in 1983. They were having great seasons, double-digit seasons, great wins, great victories. And then somewhere in the 90s, them and the city kind of faltered, because everything in the 90s was kind of changing, because in the mid 80s at that time, you had, you know, a drug pandemic going on. You had NWA who came out, and this is kind of where the stereotyping of Raider fans began, that a bunch of Raider fans are nothing but thugs, criminals, and yada, yada, yada. Which is certainly not the case. People know me. I'm a huge Raider fan, and I am far from all that other. I'm not a gangster. I'm not a drug dealer. I'm not a criminal. I'm just, just a happy football fan. But unfortunately, that's just the stereotype that they get. But what happened was Al started pushing, and Pete Rozelle wanted to make life a living hell for Al Davis. He wanted to make a living hell for Al Davis. What happened then was Pete Rozelle tried everything in his power to make Al Davis miserable, from weird tactical refereeing to um, trying to get approval for a new stadium in Los Angeles. Pretty much, it was to the point where nobody liked Al. Al didn't like he didn't like the system. That's what it's really going to come down to tomorrow, which you're going to really see a lot. Al Davis truly believed he didn't like the system. And in today's world, Al Davis is one of the very first to kind of put, people of different race, different minorities. And we have the Rooney Rule, and, a lot of people know it as the Rooney Rule. But Al Davis really deserves some credit that I think not a lot of people understand what we talk about. Al Davis was the first man to put a Latino as a head coach of the NFL. His name is Tom Flores. And that was huge back then, because you didn't really see a lot of minorities leading men at that point. And then down the road, you had Al Davis hire Art Shell, the first African American head coach, to lead his team. And then later down the road again, he hired Amy Trask to be the CEO president of the Raiders, a woman. Al Davis really was the first man to kind of break the color barriers around the NFL, from drafting Eldridge Dickey, an African American quarterback in the first round, which back then it was unheard of, because back then, unfortunately, a lot of people still kind of think of it like this, which is still unfortunate that, black quarterbacks couldn't lead. Al Davis wanted to break that barrier. He did everything he could. He was the guy that a lot of people I wish really did read up upon, to where how much he helped minorities every step of the way. Um, but to go back to it, Pete Rozelle just wanted to make life living hell. It was war. These guys had it in for each other from the 60s, because at that time, Lamar Hunt was the owner of the AFL, but they needed a commissioner. Al Davis was this young, hungry kid from Brooklyn, New York. He wanted to take on the NFL. He wanted to say, no, we will never merge with the NFL. We're going to take them down. And the surprising part was, it almost happened. Al Davis almost took it to the point where people were starting to tune in more to the AFL, because they created this new thing called the passing game. Because back then, it was all about the running game, heavy runs, heavy runs, heavy runs. But when they started introducing the passing game, that was a game changer. Deep passes, short passes, everything. That was a game changer for a lot of fans in America that love football. They're like, man, what is this? What is this vertical game? It was seeing a bunch of speed on the outside by wide receivers running. And they had the passing game in the NFL, but it wasn't as you see today. Because now today, it's a lot of heavy passing attack and very little run game. But the AFL kind of changed that by being the first league to introduce this heavy air missile passing everything. So that's what caught the people's attention. Very little defense, but very little defense, because it was very weird, because defenses didn't know how to stop the passing game, and that's how it was. And that was just the thing. But they took it. So this fight started in the 60s and everything, and they almost took it, but in the last minute, Lamar Hunt, Pete Rozelle came to the conclusion, let's merge. Al Davis was pissed. He resigned as commissioner of the AFL. He went back to Oakland, and as he became the new general manager, president, owner of the Oakland Raiders. So all in all, what I want people to understand about this video, and what I want people to understand about this is, this is going to be new to everybody if you didn't live through that, or if you don't know the history of it, you didn't study it, you didn't want to read up upon it. So for the people that are going to see this for the first time, there's about a few things that I want you to take away from this video that I'm about to put out. Number one, neither Pete Rozelle or Al Davis was the bad guy. And I hope ESPN doesn't portray either or as a bad person, because they both had their flaws. What I want people to understand, the first one was, neither of them were the bad guy. Neither of them were the yin and yang. Neither of them was good or bad for the NFL. They were just two men who were very competitive up until their deaths, who just wanted better for the league and for their respective selves. The second thing, what I want people to understand is, the Raiders, especially, this is more towards the Raider fans, as me being one. I don't really necessarily want people, to think that since this happened, the NFL has had it in for the Raiders. It's none of that. What I want people to understand is, there's no conspiracy theory. There is no conspiracy theory of the refs having it in for the Raiders. None of that. It feels that way because of this battle, and you'll see why a lot of Raider fans are a little paranoid when it comes to the, the rulings from the Immaculate Reception to the Tuck rule. You'll see why a lot of fans get a little paranoid when it comes to officiating, especially Raider fans. Number three, what I want people to take away from this is, well, there's going to be another one. I've had a little bonus snippet here. Number three, this really goes out to, the city of Oakland, really. What I want people to understand, especially if you're from that area or if you ever went to an Oakland Raider game, look, this video is going to probably say some mean things about the city of Oakland. It's probably going to say some pretty derogatory terms about the city of Oakland and maybe get made fun of that they let the city let this team walk away twice. And there's no blame for any of this except it falls on one person. It falls on one person. And I actually have this person with me right now, right here. Yep, you see that lovely lady right here? Her name is Libby Schaaf. She's the mayor of Oakland. She allowed this to happen. The city of Oakland did nothing wrong. The city of Oakland did absolutely nothing wrong for the Raiders to leave for Las Vegas. Absolutely nothing wrong. This move, because I'm sure they'll talk about it, this move is going to fall strictly on her. All she had to do was find a middle ground, and they found nothing. You're telling me you're the fifth biggest televising market for sports, and you cannot get a deal done? But they moved to Vegas where it's the 39th biggest sports market, and you're telling me they can build a $2 billion stadium, but you can't come to the table to discuss building a stadium? I don't blame Mark Davis for leaving. I do not blame the city of Oakland for not trying. I blame Libby Schaaf to this day. Libby Schaaf to me is going to be the biggest reason why I am never going to call her. I'm never going to say anything bad about Libby Schaaf other than the fact that she's the main reason why I can sit here today and say, I'm glad she didn't do what she did, because now the Raiders got a brand new stadium in Las Vegas. I could sit here today and say that. So Libby, thank you so much for what you did. Thank you for not showing up to meetings. Thank you for dissing the Davis family to the core. Thank you so much. You were going to do the things you did, and you still haven't come through. 4 years after you said that money was going to go to public schools, to hospitals, and clearly it has not. So Libby, thank you so much for letting the Raiders walk away and go to their biggest jewel of all, that brand new stadium in Vegas. And then lastly, the one thing I want people to take away from this documentary is have fun with it, because it's going to be a fun story. It's going to be a fun story. There might be some harsh words thrown around, but that's just how the way they talked. There's going to be some unsettling things that might be said, and there might be some things that I didn't even know. But the one thing I do want people to understand is I do not want people to think that either Pete Rozelle or Al Davis were bad people. I don't want people to think that. I just want them to understand this is just a story of two guys who were highly competitive, who wanted better for each of themselves. And, it's going to be creepy because I did see a video where they're going to use new technology to make it look like they're still alive, even though Pete Rozelle's been dead since 1996, and Al Davis has unfortunately passed away since 2011. So it's going to be a little creepy, but all I can say for everybody out there who loves football, who loves the history of the game, this is going to be the one where I think I want them to portray both of them in a respectful manner. And I want everybody to just have a clear thought of both of these guys. Because it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun documentary, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to finally see behind the curtain stuff, what was said, what was not said, everything. So have fun with it. And like I said, if you hear anything about the AFL, just remember, if you need any reference, just come back to this video. It's going to be okay. But mainly focus on the two guys. I want you to focus on Al Davis and Pete Rozelle, but really focus on the story that is about to be told. So I can't wait. Other than that, that's going to do it for today. I want to thank everybody that did tune in from, let's see, we got Leonardo Guerrero, James Pethris, Daniel Gonzalez, Carla, Alex, Julian, and Junior Venegas. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and so many others that did tune in that I don't have time to go through one by one. But thank you guys for watching today. As always, follow on the podcast, follow this page, follow the YouTube page, follow everything that I keep sending you guys. I'm sure I'm annoying you by now, but I just want us to get bigger. The reason I do it is because I want us to get bigger, so that way we can have more fun with this stuff. We can do like giveaways, all that stuff. So if you haven't, please follow. Other than that, tomorrow I'm going to be doing another video, but it's going to be with my good friend Steve. But it's going to be on the Instagram page. So if you're watching this on the Facebook live feed right now, go to Instagram and go to at All Sports Talk Podcast. Hit the follow button. Same thing for the YouTube video right now that's being shot at the same time. Same thing. Go to Instagram, type in at All Sports Podcast. All Sports Talk Podcast. Hit the follow button. I'm going to go tomorrow with my boy Steve. We're going to talk about a few things tomorrow. We're going to talk about the trade between the Rams and the Lions, between Matthew Stafford and the Detroit Lions, and Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff. We're also going to be talking about his Lakers, and then I'm going to try everything in my power to get a Super Bowl prediction out of him. Friday, we're going to come back here, and we're going to do our Super Bowl pick with our new friend and new partner, Maria Ramirez. She's very talented. She's very fun. I'm sure she'll be ready to go, and it's going to be an exciting time. And then we're going to talk about the game on Sunday. We're going to give out our predictions, and then we're going to listen to you guys. And we would really love it if you tuned into that one too. So 2 more videos, and then Sunday's the big game. But tomorrow we have the Al Davis versus the NFL 30 for 30. I cannot wait. This is something I've kind of been looking forward to for a minute since they announced it. And hopefully everybody has fun with it. So until then, see you guys tomorrow.